Yes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Just want to let you know that we are coming to you from Balance in Mind. We are a grassroots group funded, sorry, it's our first parent chat of the season. So you got to give me a little slack tonight. Let me start over. Balance in Mind is a grassroots group founded by parents in Lake Washington School District, powered by Lake Washington Schools Foundation, which if you want to find out more information about their programming, because they have lots of amazing programming, including Parent Chat and Balance in Mind and stuff, it's lwsf.org. Balance in Mind works with community partners like Christy tonight to raise awareness about emotional and mental health challenges facing our youth, to empower parents, and to build communities where our kids grow up healthy, resilient, and equipped for life. So just as a reminder, Parent Chat is purely for educational purposes, and we are not creating a client-therapist relationship during these talks. And the web series and any services associated with the series, including but not exclusive to open office hours, social media posts, and any other form of communication, are for educational purposes only. If you need immediate support or are in crisis, text or call 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or call Crisis Connections at 866-4-CRISIS at any time. Please know that this is a safe space that we've created, and you can be real, but we ask that everyone be respectful and kind to each other. So tonight we are welcoming Kristie Nicholson from Youth Eastside Services. She is an amazing asset to our community. And you may have heard that we are going to be talking about healing and resurfacing from the pandemic. So Kristie, let's welcome you into the Parent Chat. Thank you for being here. And you've joined us for, I don't know how many years. It feels like we've been doing this forever, but last year you're just an integral part to this.
Yeah, well, since the beginning of Parent Chat, whenever we trace that back, I think right before the pandemic hit. So this is kind of sort of a perfect place to be. So let me give a little background, if I might, Sheri, about tonight's topic.
Absolutely.
Not that anybody needs any introduction to how we've all been impacted by the COVID pandemic over the last, gosh, what are we at now? 2.5 years probably into this. Yes. So April 2020, there we go. All right, so Sheri and I were chatting about Parent Chat and kind of the series and sort of what we would like to bring to you, topics, other kinds of things that we thought would be helpful and useful, and thinking about your input from before. And what I thought was, I really want us to start off the season, the school year, with this sense of kind of re-emergence or resurfacing from the pandemic. And we sort of talked a little bit, Sheri, didn't we, back and forth about kind of, well, what would we call that? What we're talking about? Because you hear a lot of language about the new normal, or is the pandemic over? Not really, kinda, maybe, we hope so. Well, at least it's different now, it's better. But no way of really locating where are we kind of in this process and acknowledging how we've been impacted, and also sort of gathering ourselves together individually, as families, collectively, in our schools and in our communities, to actually emerge. So what is that about? And we came up with these, thoughts. Well, the healing from the COVID impacts is going to be long-term. So I just want to acknowledge that. And it's not like a one and done. And I can tell you tonight, do X, Y, and Z, and you will be healed. That would be incredibly arrogant of me, and actually contrary to the whole natural process of healing. Resurfacing. I love this image. And if we can move on just to this next slide here, I want to talk a little bit more about resurfacing. And I want to invite people to imagine And if this gives you anxiety, the image I'm going to bring forth, what I want to suggest you do is that you just breathe and you think to yourself, this is an image that I'm bringing up. I can make it smaller. I can make it less intense. I can kind of push it away. I can even introduce an entirely different image than what Kristie is suggesting. Because what I want to suggest is that you imagine the pandemic as a giant wave that has crested over us, and initially it submerged us, knocked us all down, took our breath away, left us in a state sort of shock. And here we have been swimming in that water, and we've become pretty adept at doing that. But now we want to invite ourselves and each other to resurface. So if you imagine that process of swimming up through the water and you're coming to the surface, and those of you who do yoga or Tai Chi or anything would kind of probably recognize kind of a movement that I'm going to do. And I'd invite you to follow along with it. Tonight is going to be a lot about a little getting out of our heads and getting into our bodies a bit, because sometimes we're way too much up here, and healing has a lot to do with the body, not just the mind. So it's bringing your arms in together and bringing them up and around and up. And some of this is partly reminiscent of the sun salutation. But as you do that, you're reaching the surface. And as you get there, taking a big breath. And again, up to the surface and taking a big, deep breath. And then you can look around and it's like, oh, I can see I'm above. My head is crested over the water. I can now start to become aware of what that impact meant to me, how I experienced that in my mind and in my body. And this is part of beginning that healing process. So this isn't a how-to tonight. This is kind of a broad, let's think about this. I hope to spark some kinds of thoughts and imagination for each of you in your individual situations and in your families and with your children, that you know ways to kind of move forward with this idea of resurfacing. And when you're resurfacing or you're healing, we could go to my next slide, which is about healing. It just says healing on it, I think. Yes. Okay. So we're breathing, right? Now, as we've kind of crested the surface and we're thinking about that. Healing requires awareness, which is primarily something that is a mental faculty, but it's also a physical faculty. You need to have that kind of sense of being centered. You need to have your breath. If you're going to be aware, you don't need to, if you're super anxious and frightened, then your vision is sunk down. And there's a reason why that happens, right? Because this is survival. And we need to focus on what needs to happen right here and now. We've been doing a lot of that. So this is now about how can we widen our lens back up, taking that big breath, centering our bodies so that we can use our minds to become aware of the bigger picture of what has happened to us, with us, for us, and use that for that resurfacing motion and that kind of healing. We want to go to my next slide. I want to involve body, mind, and soul. This is kind of an old phrase, but it came to me today, and I thought it's the all of us. It's the all of us as individuals. That's what that's supposed to represent, but also kind of it's all of us together. But it's not staying stuck in our head with our thoughts or our resentments or our worries or that. It's also not staying exclusively in our body and shutting out kind of any kinds of thoughts and just, you know, we're just going to be doing stuff and experiencing things physically, and we're not going to even think about it. And by soul, I mean to invite in all of those pieces that are about us as a whole, where we find meaning, kind of where what's important to us lie, the tenor of our relationships, kind of all of that that sometimes seems invisible, but is oftentimes the most important. And so rather than dictating any kind of sense of what that might mean. And if you would go to the next slide. So some of healing involves this natural process of grief, and grief, something that has thoughts, feelings, physical sensations and experiences, as well as certainly meaning, particularly when we get to acceptance and integration. We wouldn't grieve if we didn't attach to things or we didn't find things important and meaningful. I think literally without kind of having that healthy attachment, there would be no place for grief. So if we were going to have a life without the pain and suffering and sorrow of grief, we would not have any of that value, meaning, the joy of our relationships, the joy that we take in experiences, or in anything that in life that brings us pleasure and meaning. So it's definitely kind of a trade-off. It comes together. So when we're thinking about this time that we've been through with the pandemic, and so I don't mean just the illness piece of it, or the fear of that, or all of the things that had to do with the vaccine specifically, but during this period of time, because there were other things going on during this period of time too, that were just either eclipsed or were escalated by the pandemic and what was going on with that. But I want to invite people to reflect not only on what their losses might have been, but also what you might have gained. So what you might want to let go of in terms of the pain and the losses. I wonder if this is my next slide. I think it might be, if we can kind of move to that.
Sure.
So kind of giving some thought to and naming, what did you lose? That could be everything from kind of a sense of freedom to actually, many of us have lost loved ones, or people have lost capacities. What do you want them to release, let go of, as we move into this resurfacing phase? Again, what did you gain? Not all experiences during the pandemic were negative. Some were negative and positive, a mix. Some things people learned, maybe reconnected to a sense of kind of what's really important to them, or had a chance to slow down. So what do you want to keep? Because I think that's very, very important, that what we rediscovered, what we learned, how it maybe made us stronger and better, all of those things, those are ours to keep and carry forward. So
Christy, can we, sorry to interrupt, can we invite people to answer these questions in the chat box?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. Yep.
Excellent. Okay.
So we can start with, you can phrase it that way. I say, I want to let go of the grief, and put that back up here, around losing connections.
So as people are putting those in the chat box, you can, do you want to choose one of these questions in particular to have people answer?
I would love to have a little bit of both. So
okay.
What were the losses and what you want to release? And then what did you gain and what you want to keep? And I can imagine that it's difficult for folks on either one of those. It could be, if we're having that awareness now that we're kind of got our heads above water and are looking around and are sort of taking stock of what we experienced, that means we're going to feel some of that pain. And so sometimes that's hard to go there. And I think it's important to know that there is that grief process where slowly through time, you're moving through that towards acceptance and integration, and you can be releasing those things. Right. But it can be hard to just come up with them, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of things while people are adding into the chat box.
Mhm.
You know, just about the grief, we think of that so many times about losing people that we love. And obviously there was a lot of that during the pandemic, but there were so many other things that we lost. And, you know, I think from the teens' perspective, from the kids' perspective, what did they lose? A lot of them lost milestones like graduation or prom. They might have lost, you know, the like, I think of the kids going from like preschool to kindergarten to first, where they used to have those adorable, cute little ceremonies. You know, those were lost. And birthday parties, funerals. There's so many things that were lost during this time that were like, many of them may seem frivolous, like prom or graduation is just walking across the stage, right? But there was definitely a loss there.
Yeah. So the meaning and the value.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing here about impacts on relationships too, about losing connections with people. We didn't have the same physical closeness. We didn't have the same spontaneity. Lots of barriers to that. And someone wants to let go of the grief around losing those connections. Losses, found out family and friends had different priorities than me. So some of those kind of ruptures in relationships that surfaced that under the pressure of the pandemic and other things that were going on in society.
Also, let's flip this and talk about the other side of it. For some people, they gained a closeness to people because they weren't so busy, or grandparents, great grandparents learned how to do Zoom. So for the first time, families started scheduling, hey, once a month or once a week, we're gonna all join in and, you know, talk to each other. So some people got that experience where it was like, oh, wow, we actually have time to chat with our extended family and each other, even within the family, and, you know, everybody living under the same roof.
That's right.
Yeah, so let's ask that question specifically. So the experience of being together at some points in the pandemic, right? 24/7. You know, Kristie and I both hear this from the teens' perspective. And I'd love to hear from the parents' perspective too, what that was like, you know, in the beginning, and then as it continued on and on and on, you know, what was that experience like? So for me, I have one in the pandemic, one of my kids was at UW, and when they kind of shut things down, she came home. So it was kind of great for me. I got to see her more, but for her, it wasn't so wonderful. Right. And then for, you know, people who were in like Washington School District, where we kind of shut down for about 6 weeks, I think it was, you know, at first that was like, oh my gosh, we're not running all over the place and we're able to just chat and have board game night and all of that. And then it was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of family time. All right, go ahead, Kristie.
I was just thinking that then it's sort of that there's this and between things, right? That it's where there maybe is a loss of something, we can see that there is also a gain. And then when there's a gain, we also see, and this has some elements that is not so great. So all of this togetherness, increased irritability, you know, my daughter's a young adult. I could see from afar that where she would have normally been post-college exploring the world, socially, professionally, all kinds of ways, was kind of locked down in an apartment with one roommate and a lot of pressures and a job she was trying to do remotely. And so I've seen she's been able to kind of now go back out and have some of those experiences and be able to create opportunities for herself. And so this is kind of part of what I think our resurfacing and our healing needs to look like, right? It's one, to realize that there were some of these positives along with the pains and the losses. that it wasn't and the reason why I want to underline that is because all these things that you guys are putting here in the chat, these are all meaningful things, right? They've impacted you as a person. They've impacted your children. They've impacted the rest of your family and your community. Do we want to just throw that all away? I don't want to throw away 2 meaningful years of my life just because I didn't like some of it or because parts of it were very painful. And I know that when we do that, we lose really important parts of ourselves and opportunities to grow. And we can actually prolong our grief and our suffering because we're putting so much energy into just kind of keeping those things out of our awareness. And in order to kind of really be processing and recognizing that pain, we need to have the and, which is, these were the things that I discovered that were of value and that were meaning to me. And these are the things that I want to kind of integrate and knit in and move on. I'm gonna go back and check kind of some of these things in the chat. And Val, where you're saying that about Amanda has a comment, is that someone who wants to speak a comment, or?
It's up above there.
It's up above, okay.
Yeah. I can read that
Right,
one.
got it.
It says, I think particularly my younger kids lost connections to friends, and me as well. That happened for a lot of people as kind of those bubbles were being formed, right? I think we gained closeness as a family unit, and particularly the kids to each other. That's lovely.
Yeah.
And then Val says, we had a similar experience with college-age son, had to spend his junior and senior years at home. Yeah, like you were saying, Christy, with your daughter, it's usually a time for college where they're out exploring and stuff. And even junior, senior year in high school, when they began to get more independent. And then it was like, nope, you're going to be at home with us all the time. So Anna said, my oldest lost the 5th grade promotion and the big 13th birthday party. I lost my estranged mother, could not travel to take care of her estate and funeral. That happened to so many people. I'm sorry that happened to you. And that was a really awful part of COVID. But I want to say I gained my grief because I really lost my mother 20 years ago, and now I can grieve her and treasure some memories. And I gained back a relationship with her siblings, my aunt and uncle. I love that, Anna.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Very powerful. We need to have the and, yeah, recognizing that and.
This makes me think of a lot of very successful people that have had really difficult childhoods or really difficult things happen to them. You hear them talk a lot about, these difficult things happen, and I am who I am today because of those things. And we have to take this experience, as you said, we can't just say, oh, 2 years, we're going to just throw this in the trash and forget about them. We have to reflect, and which is what you're having us do tonight, Christy, and say, what did we learn about ourselves? What did we learn about our family? What did we learn about our society? What is it that we're done with now? As you're saying, you're releasing. And what is it that we find like, yeah, this is a better way to do things?
We want to carry this forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very interested kind of in having us all looking at how can we do this, right? So we can name that we want to do it, but kind of how are we going to do it? And so part of that is this mental piece of that, which is having that awareness. And as I said, that takes some kind of level and ability to sort of create a space and self-care for yourself when you're suffering and when you're grieving. Then there is the kind of, what can you do physically in your body to shift it? So when I was thinking about this earlier, I'm interested kind of what other people have had this experience about this, right? Because a lot of these are things that were, we could say, they were kind of more thought or emotion. And everything we experience, we do experience it in our body. I mean, even our brain is a part of our body, right? But we oftentimes kind of forget that. Now, during COVID, probably like many, but not all of you, put on quite a few pounds. And I have kind of reflected on that and thought, well, there's some different ways I could respond to that situation. One, I could say, man, Christy, that was really weak-willed of you, and you didn't have the discipline, and you could have, used all this COVID time to be following your exercise program up on the big screen TV or whatever. And sort of chiding myself and kind of putting that into sort of a negative evaluation of myself. I could excuse myself by saying, well, what was I going to do? And all of this stress and all of these demands and that. And I unfortunately do tend to get hungry when I'm stressed. I envy sometimes the people who don't lose their appetite when they're stressed out. But in reality, these are just kind of reactions, and they're part of our coping. What I decided instead over some time was that I was going to appreciate my body for what it gave me during the COVID time, which was a way to hold and to ground and to center not just kind of my own, but in my job, I'm kind of supporting and managing other people's distress a lot, or people who are managing other people's stress and trying to be supportive. And so there was kind of this constant swirling of that. And I'm a human being. And so there are kind of limits sometimes, right? And that is one way that by my body's almost kind of like it says, well, I'm going to hold on to that for you for a while you need me to, but I'm going to need a little more bulk to do that. So I've decided I'm going to say, thank you. And now I'm kind of saying, now I'm resurfacing. I'm going to shift a little bit. I'm kind of like, I don't know, start to kind of experiment with some other ways of managing that, or letting that go, or telling my body, you're kind of off the hook here. You don't have to do this anymore. And it's not to say like this is, again, not boom, 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 that happens. It's part of this kind of process of shifting. But here you can tell, like I've thought a lot when I say mind, body, and soul, also about, many of you have heard us talking about, or other speakers and presenters, or perhaps your therapist or your kid's therapist talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Well, the beauty of that is that it is mind, body, and soul in a lot of ways. It's thinking, it's feeling, and it's behavior, and it's kind of that whole of yourself and how that kind of all those things interrelate, right? And sometimes you kind of have to work on all of those levels. So how can we impact kind of our thinking and kind of what we're doing mentally with coming to terms with our experiences and resurfacing? How has our body served us? How can we give gratitude for these things? And how can we shift those so that they serve us better moving forward? How can we kind of move that grief through our bodies? And how do we then kind of come with finding the meaning in kind of that acceptance part of grief and integration? Because that's really not a passive thing. It's really, some people be familiar with the Serenity Prayer, so to speak, means God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, which seems passive, but actually, if you practice that, it takes a lot of energy and effort and work. And then it's changing the things I can, which is a part about kind of that integration. So we're actively asking ourselves, what did we learn? How can we carry that forward? How can we solidify that? How can we not let that go? Because I truly do think that people had experiences like you're calling out here that I don't want to go unnoticed or unappreciated, where they were positive things. They were gifts out of the crisis. And you should be able to really own those and move forward.
This is, there's so much for us to process, and we're talking about we, right? We're parents who are on this call. And so I think it's really important for us to think about that from the kids' perspective too. Like, how are we going to validate and appreciate and acknowledge the experience that they have gone through without wallowing, without kind of stagnating and getting stuck? It may be, so like you mentioned, we were kind of in survival mode, just like, floating along, like splashing along, doing the dog paddle, right? We got to get through this. But now that we're kind of a little bit back to normal,
Mhm.
we can't just say, okay, done and move on. That's
Right.
why we're talking tonight about the healing and resurfacing. So we as parents have to be very aware of talking to our kids about this now as they are starting the new school year. The conversations are not done about the pandemic. Some of them that you work with, I'm sure Christy and I work with, some of the kids are still kind of, that social anxiety is there, some of the germ anxiety is there, the not knowing, are we done with this thing? Is it going to come back? Are we back to normal? All of these things are still kind of in their DNA right now, if you will, because for them, 2 years, 2.5 years, that was a lot of their lifetime versus ours, right?
That's right. That's right. So I'm going to kind of take this a slightly different way, because oftentimes we talk about how to have that conversation with your kids. But I am, like I said, really interested in kind of this sort of idea of kind of action and movement through this resurfacing. So rather than sitting down and kind of saying anything, one, I'm going to note that a lot of what we already kind of talked through this evening is parents or adults, no matter what the age of your child is you are living the modeling of it. So when you yourself are noting losses and the pain and the grief and reminding yourselves, and sometimes out loud, but it's not like, hey, I want to sit you down and I want to talk to you about the grief process. It's more like, gosh, today I really was so in touch with how sad I felt about, when we lost so-and-so, or about this happening, or not being able to do this. And it just, maybe just say, I really made space for that feeling of sadness, because sadness is kind of one of the really important emotions we have. And if I didn't care about anything, I would never feel sad. Now you're done with that conversation. These are kind of like the riding in the car side by side kinds of conversations. Flybys, therapeutic teaching moments. Sometimes they work the best rather than talking too much. Or you might take kind of these realizations that you're having for yourself, not impose them on your child and not make them have them, but let them see you doing this healthy process of resurfacing, recognizing the pain and the suffering, recognizing there's a process of healing, kind of acknowledging where you are from time to time in that, giving a little snapshot of that, sort of interjecting the and, really care about things. And then we have pain if we have losses, disruptions, breaks. And then the next step, I don't want you to forget about that accepting and integrating. How are you moving that forward? How are you doing that? And I think if we go back to, I think, was it Anne who was talking about realizing in that grief of the present moment, reconnecting with this grief and really honoring and rediscovering the kind of the treasure of that relationship and the memories and what has stayed with her all those years. So it's kind of completing that circle in a way, if you will, for in front of your kids, demonstrating how you're doing that, right? So you're making those mental connections. You're making space for behaviors such as grieving, laughing, celebrating. Those are all things that you're experiencing kind of in your body. And then I think you're speaking to that meaning that you're making about it and how things can be different and can be better. And I want to ask people, pop in the chat right now, where have you seen signs of resurfacing this fall? as your kids have gone back to school, as the season has started to change, things that say to you, we're no longer under the wave, struggling, to be able to breathe, or to, not knowing what is going on, just kind of knocked silly. And we're not frantically dog paddling. We've been able to come to the surface and catch a little bit of a breath. What signs are you seeing of resurfacing around you or in you?
Now, I'll tell you one thing while we're waiting for people to answer that, just the social piece of it. Homecoming is coming up for a lot of kids, and there's good and bad emotions that come along with that. But just that whole kind of thing of kids planning and getting excited, and they don't have to wear masks this year for it. So it's that in and of itself is like, wow, we're getting somewhere, we're moving forward in that. And you, Kristie, mentioned, the weight gain and physical stuff that went on during the pandemic. Another piece that's really big in that's similar to that is being social. And for many people, we were obviously isolated for a while, and then other people were like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to get out of this isolation. And other people were like, this is kind of easy. I'm just going to be isolated. And for the introverts, it was like, yay, but then you've got to have connection. Like, connection is what makes us human and people and to live. So that is something we definitely can role model if we've been kind of in, isolation still, even though we've kind of opened up. Talking to your kids about that, like, oh, I haven't been talking to my friends or seeing my friends that much lately. I need to try to schedule lunch with my best friend, or, whatever that looks like for you. But talking through that with your kids, because I can guarantee you a lot of them are going through that too.
Yeah. And sometimes you can do that, oh, was kind of thinking this and doing that. And like, that happened for you? And kind of it's inviting conversation. It's not forcing it, but it's inviting it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you have the kids who don't talk, like Kristie's saying, do the flyby, like you're just kind of dropping this thing on them. It's planting the seeds. They probably hear you unless they have their AirPods in, right? They hear you and it gets them to thinking, even if it's for 30 seconds, right? So the flybys are, if you, do that throughout the day or throughout the week, then you're planting these little seeds for them to think about, and those thoughts can grow.
Right. So some of the things that I've seen too, personally, I went to a large wedding that was in person recently in a nice large room, well ventilated. I was glad about that. But that felt very celebratory. So if there are experiences like that you can participate in and that you could invite your children into. So it's re-experiencing those celebrations. Sometimes when people have missed them, I think you can also go back and maybe you don't recreate that particular one. Maybe you grieve the loss of that and then you let go of that rather than holding on to that as a resentment. And you make space to welcome new opportunities for celebrating. What might those be? Your family could create those. So this was a 5th grade promotion and the big 13th birthday party. I agree. Those are very significant milestones. So those passed in a different way because of circumstances. What's happening now? What's up next? What can we look forward to? How are we going to do that now? Let's create some of those new rituals for ourselves and creating opportunities for that. Yep, making time to see friends, attending sons' games felt so wonderful and normal to be able to play. Yep, just the simple sports games, right? And so even it's, again, just making that conscious to yourself first, and then communicating that to your kids, no matter what age they are. So we're talking from little guys on up to the 20-somethings, right? It's, wow, that felt so great to be here in person watching that game. Let's notice that. I've noticed a lot more acknowledgements in my school interactions. It felt like kind of with school staff and people in the school, so the adult kind of side of that last year, that everybody was still really underneath that wave and trying to figure out how to swim out of it. with quarantines and all kinds of things like that. I see so much more relaxation this year, so much more active conversations about how the adults were impacted, how they're processing that, how they can continue to support kids through it. Really kind of having this sense of hopefulness and looking to the future and communicating that. So there's a really different feel. It's not to say it's all done. And I already said kind of my bias about going back to normal. I don't think it's particularly helpful to go back to things. I think that's like kind of saying, like, when your children are growing up and they've gone through a particularly difficult developmental stage, that while you're going through that the goal of that is to go back to the old normal, because the goal of that is to move into the newly developed, the more mature, the better, the more improved model, right? So let's not go back to whatever it might have been. Maybe the really great things that were meaningful to us, are important to us, we pull those forward into our lives, into the people that we are now. So I think it's also another piece of this with your kids is active listening. So again, not so much the talking, but the active listening, which is noticing when they're showing awareness about what they lost, what they felt about it, how they're grieving it, where they are kind of in that grieving process. Listening for that, and listening for also what they gained and what they liked. Because a lot of people, me included, I liked a lot of that time at home, thank you very much, with my dog, and I could take a break when I needed it to, and the kitchen was right there, and I could look at the birds out the window, and it helped to balance out the stressors of the situation for me. Now, I was really fortunate. For some other people, that isn't going to be their story. The home piece of it is going to be like, that was the not good part, right? Listening to your kids for those things. So then just noting that, like, wow, I'm really, noticed how sad you had felt about that, or I really am hearing kind of how hopeful you are about this, or how good that felt. Maybe sharing something of your own that's kind of a parallel. Yeah, absolutely right about the kids who went from elementary school. Now they're, halfway through middle school, and goodness sakes, what happened there. So now I think that's about creating opportunities of all kinds. So again, not about kind of having heavy conversations, but it's about thinking through what are those developmental pieces that maybe they were a little shortchanged on. This could be learning, it could be social things, it could be experiences, it could be experiences that bring them that sense of accomplishment, or a sense of adventure, or I'm old enough now to do this. So how might you, in your just day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month lives, because I'm not saying everybody has time to sit around and kind of imagine, we might like to do it, but have that much time and energy to sort of imagine these great big things. But thinking about kind of like, what can we celebrate this week? I feel like my kid really missed out on getting that sort of applause about that accomplishment. How could we create a real situation like that? Or just being out in the world and exploring and having fun and being relaxed. How can we create opportunities to do that? If our bodies were, not only were we kind of socially isolated at home and stationary, but if you were like me, where it's like my body's like, well, I'm going to handle that by being very still and not moving. It's like I'm having to talk my body back into, no, let's move. We like to move. You used to like to move. So how can you introduce that into your day? How can you invite in experiences that are healing for you? And that's going to differ for each of you. So, and it's different for each of your kids. So I'm not going to dictate that to you, but I would love to hear kind of some of your thoughts just right off the top of your head about what some of those things might be for you. So thinking about kind of body, mind, and soul, and creating opportunities for shifting and resurfacing, for pulling things forward, for sort of creating opportunities, yep, for learning and growth that maybe were missed. What are some thoughts about fairly simple things really that you could do around that? Now you could maybe do them in the next week or month.
That's
Could be
good. So
things for yourself, could be for
you're
your
asking
family.
about opportunities to create in the next week or so to kind of either celebrate or reflect, or what else is in there? This is the main thing.
Mhm.
Celebrate or reflect.
Celebrate, reflect, be aware, also to just creating opportunities for learning as well.
Okay.
Doing things differently, seizing the opportunities that we have where we have a little bit more freedom as we're resurfacing. So Sheri mentioned about kind of with the social anxiety and pieces like that for kids. If they're still kind of experiencing that because they are resurfacing, we are not all the way on the other side yet. How might you create opportunities to help them experience those kinds of situations and have some successes with them? So going and visiting some of the places I haven't been to since before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's also not even talking about like, big vacations. This is just local things that you can go and experience by yourself if you need that, but also be with your kids to say, hey, let's just go down and try out this new park, or go watch a local softball game, or a high school football game, something that has kind of been shut down for a while. That'd be awesome. So if you can put some of those thoughts in the chat box, we appreciate that. I'm going to go up here to O Cagney's. What I'm going to say O, because I imagine there's a name behind there, but I'll just call you O, is talking about the fact that they're very appreciative that there's a shift in focus by educators and employers, which is really great, right? About the importance of mental health and social emotional learning within our daily lives, and how mental health isn't something to be swept under the rug as in years past, but it's so important to be talked about, and allowing everyone to support one another. Absolutely. This was great to kind of, like you said, we opened up the rug and we said, here you go. Unfortunately, the numbers went up, through the pandemic. We're still seeing that rise in numbers of mental health struggles and crises. But yes, it is wonderful that we are now talking about it as a society. And like you said, the employers and educators are talking about it too.
Right. And they're creating spaces. I mean, and I know because my team is involved in that. So even an example of that says this is a real actual thing, right? It's not just a dream in somebody's head, is that between a grant that we got from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and Lake Washington School District, we now have a behavioral health support specialist full-time in each of the middle schools and a couple of the choice schools. Whereas before they were split between 2, and then the year before they were split between 3. And so they are there much more able to partner with the school counselors and the other support people in the school, addressing exactly that, acknowledging what kids went through, what the adults in the building also have gone through, and then looking together at how do we build resiliency, how do we heal together. So absolutely. And then those negative emotions about being in the pressure cooker with your family 24/7 for 2 years. Yes.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, how do you invite spaces into those relationships in your family and create those, naming that, right? By saying not like, I don't like you and I don't like you and this and that. It's like, yeah, I love all you guys. And this just was really hard, for me and probably for you. Now that we have some spaces, I want to have good relationships. I want to be connected. I want to be doing stuff with you. But how do we manage that? How do we have like quality separate time and quality together time. So rather than swinging from one pendulum to the other, like here I am in the pressure cooker with you all, now we never see each other or talk to each other. That's part of what I mean about discovering what it is that you want to let go of, but also what you want to carry forward, right? Because you want those relationships to be better and stronger now and in the future.
Yeah, that was a residual thing that happened. I mean, kids spend a lot of time in their bedrooms anyway, but what I'm hearing from a lot of parents are like, okay, Coach Sheri, how do I get my kids out of their bedroom now? So this is part of that mindfulness of, okay, they were in their bedroom because that's how they were able to create their space when they're literally in lockdown, right? So now how do you kind of bring them back out? And that's with those connections and those great conversations and, just finding a different way to do things. And it may start out with, as you said, bring it to the forefront. This is how we ended up here. I would love to change this. How can we do this together and make that happen?
And then I think sometimes it's an enticing invitation, right? It's like, and I think, again, it's the naming it to tame it part, right? That's a very simple thing. And that's some way we can use our kind of brains and awareness to say, wow, that really sucked for all of us. And I totally get it that you were kind of in your room, and that's kind of normative anyway.
Yeah.
But now it's like, how do we reemerge? And so I'm working on having some balance of that. So for example, I'm going to go, here and there, or do this, or I'm reaching out to my friends. What are you thinking you might do? Or let's go out for pizza. Or we're ordering in pizza and you get to choose the movie that we're watching, or if there's a board game. And it's not that it's like the expectation is 24/7, right? It's a balance of that again, but it's issuing the invitation. It's using our kind of creativity to create those, again, opportunities for moving forward, for them to have some of those corrective experiences, to rebuild the strong parts of the relationship and kind of heal over some of those irritabilities. But certainly we don't want to pretend they didn't happen.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of crazy making when we do that. We don't want to do that to our kids. We want to model that awareness, acceptance, and accountability. I'm going to go for 3 A's here. Because we don't want to say, well, I never did that, or you never did that, or let's just forget about it. It's like, nope, that happened. I understand why that happened. Here's what we're doing about it.
Right. And it says that they still need to kind of coax their teen out of the bedroom, which is absolutely normal, right? Rather than hang out online, though. And this is a piece that did happen. Like the social lives of our teens and us too, and some of the younger kids became online. So it's like 2 years, that was the pattern, their online pattern. They actually created communities and friends. So, and I totally understand what your struggle is there, but don't give up. You'll get them out of their bedroom here and there so they can interact with you. Kristie, I stopped sharing slides, but did you have other slides that you wanted to go through? That's it. Okay. All right. Awesome. So we are nearing the end of our time. So let me just remind everybody that we're doing these parent chats frequently. It's about twice a month, and we're going to have amazing speakers like Christy join us to share their wisdom and their expertise. This has been streamed to Facebook, so you can always find things there, but it's also going to be on YouTube. So let me go back to sharing my screen to kind of show you the end of things here, if you will. Okay, so did we get through that? Yes. Alrighty. Okay, so thank you, Kristie. As I said, it's great always to have you stop in, and I know we're going to be hearing from you throughout the year, and we'll bring you back in as things come up. And as always, I love that you're so responsive if things unexpectedly come up too. That's great to know that you are a resource. And what would you say, Kristie, as far as people reaching out to you as a resource? Who should contact you and when?
Well, I'm always happy to kind of communicate with parents and clarify anything I was talking about, anything like that. And so my email is just kristie@youtheastsideservices.org. So feel free to reach out in that way. But I also want to remind those of you, particularly who in the Lake Washington School District, in the middle schools, at STEM, at ICS, And then at the high school, we have resources, a great team of people there to support your kids, also to kind of talk things through with you. And if you call and ask your school counselor if you don't know who your behavioral health sports specialist is at the middle and choice schools. And then at the high school level, that's Andrea Frost. She is our substance abuse prevention and intervention specialist. So she's supporting the Evergreen behavioral health social workers. So it's, again, knowing that there are people on the ground there that are sort of carrying out that work, as the person had commented, that as the district really recognizes the importance of the social emotional piece.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for that. We so needed a change in that. And then so we have Kristie at Eastside Services. I'm a coach for teens and for parents. So you can always find a lot of information in my Facebook group, which is the Parenting Lab. And you can go to teenyseattle.com as well. And of course, you can go to Balance in Mind. We've got lots of amazing stuff there. lwsf.org/balance in mind with some hyphens in there. You can see it at the bottom right of your screen. We've got also a Facebook group for Balance in Mind, and everybody working on this team, who's all volunteers, are doing an amazing job of keeping things updated and adding in great information. All of the parent chats that we have done, Kristie and I, and everybody else has joined us over the last, I guess it's 2.5 years, something like that. You can find those actually at tinyurl.com/BIM videos. There's an action S. It somehow got to the next line, but you can go there and find a lot of really great conversations that we've had over the last couple of years about mental health. Really what we are wanting to do is to bring mental health resources straight to you so that you can find the support that you need. And if there are other things that come up that you're like, hey, we need to talk about this, you can email us and let us know that, hey, this is a topic that I think we really need to cover. Okay, so again, this is presented by Balance in Mind, which is powered by Lake Washington Schools Foundation. We have a lot of really, really great speakers and presenters that are coming on board this year, this calendar year. So if you go to, I guess all of you are signed up already because you're here tonight, but you can pass this along to other people that they can come on and join us as well. And then if you want to support this and allow us to keep doing this, you can donate at the URL down below there. Some of the things that are coming up, we have the next parent chat is going to be with a couple of great people from Lake Washington School District who are talking about how to access and what are the resources available to us as parents and families if our kids are going through mental health struggles. So not just what counselors are available, but how dealing with academics do you deal with it? So IEPs, 504s, how to use the mental health days that have recently been added into our repertoire of ways to help our kids. So it's going to be a really, really profound conversation. And of course, it'll be recorded, but I would highly recommend you join that. Then we have one on emotional regulation, how to help our kids regulate their own emotions, because we can't do it for them. And we also have someone coming in, super excited about the speaker. He is a sports psychologist, so he's going to tell us how do we support our athletic kids, whether they're top level achievers or whether they're just in sports to have fun. What does that look like? And we've got a lot of other ones, but so go on to our I guess where should they go? What's the best place? Any of these that are listed on the left-hand side, those will have those upcoming things. So excellent. And Val put it into the chat box for us all. Okay, everyone, that's a wrap on our first parent chat for the season. Yay, I'm so excited. And, we're going to continue to really build on this, build the conversations, have a community where we are talking about mental health. It's not swept under the rug anymore. As Anna mentioned, we are bringing it to the forefront, or that might have been but we're going to bring it to the forefront and keep the conversation going. So thanks to all of you for taking your time to be here and spread the word about these parent chats, because we would love to support as many people as we possibly can. Thank you, everyone. Good night. As we sign off, if you'd like to put in the chat box something that you got from tonight, we would really appreciate that.